to unmute. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And my questions are for Mr. Wilkins as well. First of all, Mr. Wilkins, let me preface my questions by just telling you how appreciative all Canadians are for all the work that the corrections service officers are doing, especially during this very difficult time. Your work is not unnoticed by all Canadians. Mr. Wilkins, Minister Blair has stated that he is working with the Commissioner of Corrections and the Chair of the Parole Board, who are indeed both independent bodies, to release non-dangerous offenders. The term non-dangerous has never been defined by the Minister. This may not be in your purview, Mr. Wilkins, but a three-part question here real quickly. Have you or your members witnessed any pressures to release inmates who may not be ready for release? What is your experience of the policy of the CSC on this issue? And are you aware of any definition of the term non-dangerous that the Minister may be referring to?
Well, thank you for the question. I guess right off the bat, no, I'm not. I don't know the term non-dangerous when it comes to somebody that's incarcerated. I think that they are for a reason, that they pose a threat to public safety, and that that threat needs to be assessed constantly through a correctional plan. Another part of your question with regard to, have our members been pressured to release? Of course not. We're not, as I mentioned before, really in the decision-making process. Our correctional officer twos, who do have some casework and primary workers have some casework responsibilities, but I have not been given any indication that there's been pressure placed upon any of my members for the release of inmates. And as for the natural law, when it comes to somebody that's coming near the end of their sentence, they are eligible for some form of statutory release or day parole and parole eligibility. And for the most part, I think that's the work that's been going on. Hope that answers.
Yes, thank you very much. Second question, Mr. Wilkins. In your news release of March 30th, you said the immediate release of inmates under the care, custody, and control of correctional services signals a complete disregard for public safety. The release of a few inmates would not solve the potential spread of COVID-19 in our facilities. It would only increase the risk for Canadians. Were you or your union ever consulted by groups or individuals who have loudly called for the release of more offenders during the COVID? And what do you think has motivated such calls? Is the motivation really offender safety, or do you see it more as an ideological goal simply to release more inmates?
Well, first off, no, there had been no consultation. We've, of course, learned that through different media outlets, that there was calls from interest groups to release. And of course, we still see calls from, various family members of inmates who are petitioning different media outlets to release their sons or daughters. I stand by my statement that that's not the solution here. That it's the protect in place, and I do believe that the immediate release, and this is one that it does not take into consideration the laws and the governing body of the parole board. I just mean that the immediate release certainly would put the Canadian public in jeopardy, and of course. There is certain policies and procedures and laws that are there for a reason, and that is to protect the Canadian public. And if those things are not going to be followed or met, then I do believe that there's an increased risk.
Are you aware of any challenges in the past 2 months related to offenders who have been released following social distancing rules?
No, I'm not aware.
What restrictions exist for the CSC and for parole officers when it comes to monitoring offenders who have been released into the community the current pandemic? And are you concerned that effective monitoring may be increasingly difficult?
I think effective monitoring is certainly increasingly difficult, and not that I have a firm knowledge as to what's happening with our community parole officers, but I do know that they're no longer entering homes. They kind of do their interviews at the doorstep with inmates, and I don't think that they're going to have a very good indication as to what's happening behind the walls or in the homes to begin with. But no, I haven't heard anything else on that, to be honest.
Thank you, Mr. Wilkins, and thank you, Madam Chair.